going here. So, all right, and we're live. So howdy all. This is Kyle Whittington. It's a little hectic right now, so for those of you who have joined, thanks. Tonight have been graciously joined by Father John Brown, and who's given us this time to talk about a little bit of the craziness that we're facing. So, Father John, thanks for coming.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure. It's always nice to talk to you. And, there's never been a better time to be in the bark of Peter than right now. So, so here we are.
Yeah. So let me, let's see here. Hold on. There we go. All right, cool. Just need to take care of something real quick. But yeah, so you say there's never been a better time to be in the bark of Peter. Now,
Sure.
I think I actually saw your comment on the Council of Trent this morning that said exactly that.
That's right.
So do you mind just expanding on that a little bit?
Okay, so look, we have I don't know about you, but I don't know how I would react to being martyred and not metaphorically speaking, but actually having, a knife put to my throat and having my life ended for the Lord. I'd like to believe that I could be martyred, but let's be honest, I'd be lucky to be, an companion, even if they did it quick. Right. So, there's been a time in the church where that's what was called for. Now we have this sort of softer version of that, where we are called by God to be strong, be faithful, to really believe that God is in charge, to really believe that His church is what He wants to exist here on earth. That there's this indefectibility here that we believe in, and we're not cafeteria Catholics. We're not going to just like take out the indefectibility, but still believe in the other stuff or whatever. I mean, we believe in all these things, and so I think that in the end we are in a position right now to be called upon to be saints. And so I fully believe that it's times like these that God calls up saints. And so here's our shot. Here's our shot to be a light in the darkness, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I was listening to an interview by one of your fellow Eastern priests, who the Father Jason Sharon, on his last appearance on Pints with Aquinas, and he was talking about like how oh wow, okay, well hey, St. Peter's the Rock, thank you for the super chat, that's incredibly generous of you. But it's easy to get like this false nostalgia. It's like, oh, if only I had lived in the Middle Ages, especially as a Jesuit, it's just like, oh, if only they had sent me to Japan shortly after, whatever. So, but it's just like, but that's not the case. Obviously, that's not in God's active will or permissive will that you live in that time. But this current milieu is where you will be made a saint, or this is where you will be damned, and it's just. Kind of goes back to Gandalf of like, all we have to do is all we have is to do what we can with the time we've been given. I probably butchered that quote.
But that's right on. That's exactly right.
Yeah. So let's talk about the present issue that's going on with the Dubia and the Responsa. I probably, perhaps sinfully so, take a little bit of pride in that I haven't read a single article that has analyzed it, but I've read both the Dubia and the Responsa.
They're short enough and easy enough to understand.
Yeah.
I wish more people did that. I Googled it today and saw the first 9-10 headlines, and I couldn't believe what I was reading for the headlines, because they did not match at all what I had read when I read the original.
Yeah. And like I've actually got the Responsa up here. In fact, you know what? Here, I'm gonna, just so those who are in the live chat right now, here, I'm going to post the link of what I'm looking into so that y'all can read this too. This is on the Vatican website. It's, this is straight from it, whatever. This matches the Responsa that Cardinal Burke posted on his personal website. So cool. All right. Let's see here. Which one was it? All right. So the one that the one part of the answer that seems to be causing a bunch of hubbub is, however, in our relationships with people, we must not lose the pastoral charity which should permeate all our decisions and attitudes. Now, that's just the first sentence.
This is Dubia 2. This is Dubia.
This
number
is
2.
Yeah. This is
Question number 2.
Response to the second dubium, and this is
Mhm.
paragraph D as in Delta.
D. That's got a lot of people upset. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just like, okay, in our relationships with people, we must not lose the pastoral charity, which should permeate all our decisions and attitudes. So far, I don't think that you're gonna lose anybody on that. Like, everybody
Mhm.
should be kind of on the same page there. Like, okay, yes, charity should be primary. We should be doing that. Okay, cool. Let's see here. The defense of objective truth is not the only expression of this charity. And I will say also true. The example that I gave, that I thought of whenever I said this, have you ever been to, God forbid, the funeral a funeral of a child, and you know, you see the mother of the child who has just passed away, and they say something along the lines of, um, "Oh, my baby's an angel now." Now,
Mhm.
that is theologically incorrect. That is not the case. However, charity would dictate that you not correct her right then and there at her child's funeral.
Mhm.
Like, so it's just like, yes, objectively she is wrong. There's a time and place to correct her there, but you know, it's have a little bit of charity there. Do you have any thoughts on that so far?
Yeah, and I think also, to even pull back a little bit from what the response has said, I think it's even saying that, like, truth is not the only thing you should be saying, as in, like, you should be still saying the truth, but also something you should also be saying words of kindness. You should also be saying
Right,
words of encouragement. I kind of forget all the words that were in there, but it was like, okay, truth cannot be the only, as in, like, sola, right? Like the and nothing else. It's like the
right.
truth plus these other things, which are kindness and patience and all these other kind of things. So that's at least how I read it. Are you familiar with? Does the name Sergei Eisenstein ring a bell for you at all? He's a
I can say with 100% confidence that no, it does not ring a
he's
bell
a
at all.
he's a Russian filmmaker who kind of it's called montage theory, which is like a way of displaying images. We sort of take for granted that we have all these cues when we watch a movie, that we understand what's happening because we're just so used to seeing how movies happen, right? And how cut scenes especially happen.
Mhm.
This montage theory of his was one that said, that the context of the image that you're going to show means everything, and especially the expressions of the faces around the image. So let's say you see the image is this. The image is a small child in bed with its eyes closed and not moving. If you see a mother, smiling and sort of like quietly, maybe like this as context, you assume
Mhm.
the child is sleeping. If you
Right,
see if you see instead someone screaming, you assume the child has passed away, right? And
right.
so you see, so if the image of the child has not changed, and you went from complete and utter happiness because it was in the context of other people responding to the child in
Mhm.
happiness, or just complete and utter terror, and I feel like that's what's happening with nearly all of this, is that if you're first introduced to these responsa, you're if you're first introduced by someone who's pulling their hair out, you're going to be like, okay, I'm about to read this in a way in which I'm going to want to pull my hair out too. And if instead someone comes and says, oh my goodness, have you read what the Pope said? It's awesome. It's the best thing ever. He's finally answered all these questions. We've always said he doesn't answer the dubia. Here he is answering the dubia, and he has given us
Right.
absolute gems here. This is great. You're going to read the dubia completely differently. You're going to read the responses completely differently. So I feel like when I read stuff like this and I hear that, everybody's upset about, dubia 2 letter G. It's like, is it really like let's just, I'm not saying read
Right.
it out of context. No, I mean, I think you should read it within the context of Amoris Laetitia. I think you should read it within the context of everything else we've ever done and everything we've done for 2,000 years. And once you do that,
Yeah.
it's like, oh yeah, the Pope's on my side, which is not the most important thing.
Yeah.
The most important thing is that the Pope is right and he guides me and shepherds me into being right. But it is
Yeah.
comforting to know that he's not out there trying to legalize gay marriage or something like that.
Yeah, believe it or not, Pope Francis is not under your bed, like, trying to destroy the faith. Like, he's not the boogeyman. Like, which a lot of these times, like, I've seen people like saying like, well, it's time that, it's like, oh, but because of all else he's ever done. And it's just like, all else he's ever done or all the other times he's been twisted. And, like we said before the stream started, like, Pope Francis has failures, like, but at the same time, like, Peter denied Christ 3 times. As far as I'm aware, that's like the worst crime that any pope has ever committed, was whenever Peter denied Christ publicly enough to where it's recorded in the scriptures.
Mhm.
And yet, like, Chesterton has that wonderful quote, is that God knew that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So he started the chain with the weakest link. So, while, the Pope can fail, he's not impeccable. That's not a Catholic doctrine, that the Pope is impeccable. He's very peccable. It's it it's like, this isn't a cause for despair, even if he did say these things. But the big part, the big underlying thing is just he didn't. And what he's saying here lines up with 1 Corinthians chapter 13. 1 through 2. If I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and have not charity, I am become as sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. And if I should have prophecy and should know all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I should have all faith so that I could remove mountains and have not charity, I am nothing. So, like, so far these words are just resounding what's exactly in scripture. And, like, if you have a problem with this, at this point, if you have a problem with what he's saying, you don't have a problem with Pope Francis, you have a problem with the Bible. And that's something you and God need to work out.
Yeah. Well, I do want to say this, and maybe we're getting a little bit off script
here,
instead of going through the answers one by one or anything. But I do want to give a little bit of insight to the way that the Jesuits are organized. And I believe that Pope Francis was formed in that kind of organization.
Yeah.
That may give us some insight as to why he does and says the things he does and says, and why some people go crazy when he does and says what he does and says. The Jesuits are ordered in such a way that obedience is everything, right? So one man, a superior's command is supposed to be everything. I mean, absolutely everything. And the best Jesuits are the ones who are looking towards the Pope as kind of a superior that ought to be able to give us marching orders into a place where we know we're going to die, right? Or into some other place where we know we're going to be completely ineffective, or to some other place where, who knows what, right? That we're supposed to just accept those as the words of Christ when they're spoken to us. So when a Jesuit becomes a superior, they wield a lot of power. So rather than undo that, what a Jesuit superior typically does is he says, I'm going to get the broadest consultation I possibly can before I ever come down with this definitive end-all statement that's going to put everything to rest. So there's usually a really slow approach to really saying something that is absolutely definitive. There's usually a very slow approach to that. And my sense is that Pope Francis usually is on that side of like, hey, let's not shut down the conversation. The two previous popes, I think, I personally love the two previous popes. I love this pope as well. But Benedict XVI and John Paul II, I think, did a good job of like making it clear for everybody what we believe, so that you can't go astray. And Pope Francis feels like, because of those last two popes, this gives him the chance to say, okay, well then what are the things that we can discern? And he loves the word discernment. He uses it all the time. It's in his Episcopal motto, right? He loves the thought of discerning. And discerning means gathering up all this information. So he doesn't want to see the conversation shut down. On the other hand, you have the cardinals who don't want to see confusion, right? And they don't want to see people abusing, abusing any kind of ambiguity or anything like that. So they're coming in saying, hey, we want a yes or no answer. We're asking you to put it in black and white. I totally respect that too. Like, I completely respect it. It'd be nice if the truth is, okay, for me personally, I'm never going to bless a gay marriage, so it doesn't matter. I don't believe in gay marriage. I don't believe in all that stuff. So it's not going to be a big deal for me. But, it would be nice to know for sure that I'm on the right side here. So please just tell me, black and white, give it to me. And I think the Pope is saying, at this point right now, we're about to start the Synod of Synods, right? We're about to have these big conversations. Do we really want to put things in black and white before the conversation has even started? And so that's why he's got that one place where he says, he doesn't say it's okay to bless marriages so long, or I'm sorry, bless unions so long as they don't look like a marriage. He's not
Right.
saying that. He says instead, he says, I forget his exact words, but he says, so he uses the word, let me quickly find this. I have all the printouts
Yeah.
right here in front of me. Where is it? Yeah. Okay. Therefore, this is letter E for question 2. Therefore, pastoral prudence must adequately discern whether there are forms of blessing. So he's not saying there are forms of blessing. Go ahead and bless
Yes.
people as long as it's not a gay marriage. Go ahead and do it. He's not saying it. He's saying, therefore, not theological structures that are going to give us the algebra to be able to conclude the rock solid black or white answer. Instead, it's pastoral prudence must adequately discern whether there are, and you can say or not, whether there are or not forms of blessing requested by one or more persons that do not convey a mistaken concept of marriage. So like when I read that, I think, God, he sounds so much like a Jesuit when he says that. He sounds so much like a Jesuit superior who knows that his word is going to be taken as law. And so he's careful to give his word in such a way that it doesn't shut down the conversation just yet. So the Synod has an opportunity to at least get going and give a chance for people to talk about these things. Now, I, for one, do not look forward to seeing all that conversation because it's going to look like sausage being made, right? It's going to be ugly. You've got some people who want more than anything to have gay marriage, and they're willing to settle for even the smallest steps towards it because they want to get the camel's nose under the tent. And I see that, and I know that every case that people have said, that people have talked about, the feelings of the LGBTQIA plus movement and all that stuff. I know what a gay pride parade looks like, and it's disgusting. So like, I've seen where people really go with this when you give them all kind of room. And so like, okay, I'm not looking forward to the messiness of the Synod, right? But I think the Pope isn't the worst person in the world for being much more comfortable with that messiness, right? In fact, I think there might even be some grace in that I'm willing to stick around to see,
Yeah. So I do see some things going on in the chat that I do feel like that are worth addressing. And a trifle, I'm really glad that you're not using your real name because I'm going to kind of call you out here. And I want to apologize. My intention is not to embarrass you, but but here we go anyway. So the circumstances of the release of the dubia call into question best intent from the Cardinals, unfortunately. Now, if you guys find me on Facebook, which a lot of you have, it's kind of weird. That if you go to my like my banner picture on my Facebook profile, it's a picture of me and my family with Cardinal Burke. I have the utmost respect for Cardinal Burke. I think he's done a lot of good for the church. And I'm going to still assume best intent. Now, Father John, would you like to mention, to kind of give us an explanation of what the Ignatian presupposition is?
Yeah, so the Ignatian presupposition, and it's in the Catechism, we're all bound to it, but it's the idea that you're supposed to, right off the bat, believe that anybody who puts something out there, that they mean it in an Orthodox way. They mean it in a way that is compatible with the faith, and they don't mean it, they are not heretics and all that kind of stuff. If you have reason to wonder about it, like it's like, man, I can't wrap my mind around the right way for this to be, I probably ought to approach that person and ask them how they mean it. And if they do mean it in a heterodox way, then I should probably use all these subtle means and friendly, ways of trying to get them to move in the right direction, right? I don't just think it, this is the church here, that it's wrong to presume that they mean it in all these bad ways, especially when we haven't had a chance to talk to them or whatever. Now, let me just say this. The facts are what they are. Yeah. And I have there's a good friend of mine who is a fairly well-known YouTuber who I believe that he's texted me this morning, and he said, I can't believe my eyes, right? Because he loves these Cardinals as well, right? He's like, these guys are great and all, has always had a high level of admiration for these guys. But when he puts the facts out there, a trifle is not totally wrong. That, boy, it certainly looks like there's some things that don't add up with the timing and with the way that they summed up the Pope's answers, but didn't print the Pope's full answer, and how it, is this a misrepresentation and all that? I'm still with my friend there. When he says, I can't believe my eyes, I sort of say, you know what? I don't have to believe my eyes. I don't have to believe anything right now. Like, I can wait and let the dust settle before I believe that the Cardinals were up to no good, right? Before I'm going to
Right.
believe that the Cardinals are up to no good, I'm just going to hold off. I don't have an opinion. I don't know. I don't know either way.
Yeah.
And yes, based on a limited number of facts, there's reasons to worry. But I also, I mean, I met Cardinal Burke. He's one of the nicest guys I've ever met. And I met him a
Yeah.
long time ago. And then I met him more recently. He came by my high school and he blessed the statue of Our Lady of Fatima. And I mean, I'm a fan, right? I read Cardinal
Right.
Sarah's books, and Cardinal Sarah is just really, really, really awesome, right? So
Oh yeah.
I can't believe my eyes either. So I'm just holding off. I don't have an opinion whether or not they meant wrong or not. I don't have an opinion, you know?
And I think like that's there's a lot of wisdom there in holding off, suspending your judgment, because it's just like, well, and even like indefinitely suspending your judgment, because I promise you that at your judgment, you are not going to be asked, did you have the correct opinion on Pope
Right.
Francis? Did you have the correct opinion on Cardinal Burke? None of that even matters. And it's just like, and even if you do have the correct opinion on these prelates or the Holy Father, it's what good does that do? Like, what is okay? Cool, you've got all the correct opinions. Now what? So I don't know.
Right, exactly. That's right. I don't need to know who. I don't need to know if there's some other circumstance, some other piece of information. I don't need to know that. I don't think anybody who thinks that. I don't think you're crazy. I certainly don't think you're crazy if you think the Cardinals, there was some subterfuge there, right? I mean, you have enough facts there to not be crazy to think that. I just don't feel like I need to conclude that right now, and I don't blame anybody who does. I certainly don't. I'm very good friends with this person, but I don't. For myself, I'm still holding back on kind of like concluding, oh, those guys are bad guys, or they've done a bad thing, or something like that. I don't need to conclude that just yet. In fact, I mean, the on the other side of it, I don't think that Pope Francis has concluded that, because he took the time to answer their questions. He could have given them the cold shoulder. He could have said, "You guys are all bad," and he said that before. I won't answer people who I think are just out there to attack me. He has said before he wouldn't have any kind of back and forth with anybody. And here he is giving them some space to ask their questions, and then to respond to them in what appears to be a pretty well thought out response, carefully thought out response. So I can only assume that I can only assume that there's probably just a whole lot more there that keeps me from sort of like drawing a conclusion that says anybody's a bad actor here. I'm not ready to do that yet. But I don't blame anybody who does. I'm just not ready to do that.
Yeah, and honestly, it's my favorite. It's my favorite misattributed quote. I know for a fact that Father Mitch Packwood didn't say this. It comes from a meme, but I still repeat it so much, and it's, one can cultivate a medieval sense of piety by having no idea what His Holiness in Rome is doing. And I post that so much in so many different places. And because it's like, if the Pope wants you to know something, it will come down to you through the appropriate channels. Like, chances are your priest will be preaching about it, from the pulpit, if you really need to know about it. Yeah. So, it's
well, and I would also say this. Like, I think we could all, myself included, everybody all could kind of step back and say, what has me so perturbed right now? Like, and I don't mean like, well, letter E of question 2 has me so perturbed. I mean, like, if you read the Catechism, the section on the passions, it says that all of our passions, and passions are there, naturally speaking, to help propel us to action, right? So anger is meant to propel us into action, right? Sadness is meant to propel us into some kind of an action, right? And that you can judge the anger or the sadness or the whatever based on the thing that you love. So you get angry when the thing that you love is threatened. You get sad when you lose the thing that you loved. You get joyful. You get joyful when you have possession of the thing that you love. So really, it's the thing that you love that kind of decides whether or not you're on the right, that you should take action or whatever. In most cases, I think, as much as the Synod is all about we want to listen. Nobody asked me anything in the Synod, right? So like in some ways, I hate to use the word impotent, but like I feel kind of impotent when it comes to a lot of this. I'm just kind of like along for the ride on a lot of this, right? So there's not a lot of, so my passions are not going to help me do a whole lot of things better concerning these things, right? I like I said, no, first of all, nobody's going to ask me to bless their gay union or whatever, right? No, everybody knows me well enough not to do that. So there's not a lot of there's not a lot of sort of like response that I'm going to be able to have concerning these things, right?
Yeah.
So then there's the question of like, okay, well, is what I want or what I love, is what I love someone telling me that because I'm not pro-gay enough and I didn't get invited to that party, that I'm righteous, right? That I'm on
Right.
the side of good. And so even though I suffered for it, I suffered for the side of good. And I need someone from on high in the church to tell me that I'm doing the right thing and that I'm okay for being not okay with gay civil unions, right?
Yeah.
Do I need somebody? Is that why I'm angry, right? Or am I angry because I have a close relative who is gay, and I and they won't talk to me anymore. This person won't talk to me anymore, and so I know that I'm doing the right thing by not changing my mind on that, and I need the church to tell me that I'm doing the right thing. Is that what I love? Is that what I'm sorry that I might be missing, or whatever? Is it that I myself struggle with same-sex attraction, and I'm fighting the good fight here, and yet these people over here are just doing whatever they want, and I can't stand that, and I want
Right.
justice, right? I want everybody who's gay to suffer the way that I suffer, or whatever. These are these are complicated things, right? The human heart is a
Right.
complicated thing. It's a really complicated thing, and I think it would do us a lot of good to kind of like just take our heart out of our chest, have a good look at it, right? Like that. I love that painting of St. Augustine where he's like holding his heart and looking at it,
Yeah.
do like St. Augustine and just take out your heart and objectively look at it for a second and say, what's got me so riled up right now that I've publicly made comments about wanting to be Orthodox or something instead of Catholic, or
Yeah.
or the Pope Francis is the demon Pope, or whatever, like there's the demonic papacy, whatever. What's
Yeah.
gotten me so riled up that I'm willing to go to those lengths? I've really got to check my heart before I worry about
Yeah.
the syntax of letter E in dubia question number 2.
Yeah. And I mean, there's so many things that come to mind on that. Like one of the things is about removing the beam in your eye before you take out the splinter in your brother's, and and I think like the response of the faithful to these things, and actually, I do even want to back it up a little bit more because somebody in the chat did post something that I want to throw up on the screen here. But basically, it's the secular reaction to all of this.
Oh yeah, it's pretty frustrating.
And yeah, so Catholic Church's future on the table as Pope Francis kicks off 2023 synod with an LGBTQ bombshell. CBS
Right.
News. You know what? I probably just got demonetized on that. So your super chats, the two of you that have already given them, are greatly appreciated. So it's just like CBC News said this 10 hours ago. To which my response to that is, why are you listening to news about the church from the enemies of the church? They neither understand nor do they have an interest in like putting the church in I don't even want to say the best possible light, but the most honest light. So yeah.
Yeah, I saw. So okay, so I don't mean to show all of my cards here, but I happen to be watching the Daily Wire, and and then Ben Shapiro was sort of giving his take on Pope Francis, and first of all, he was he's the Pope isn't the Pope is he took the same tack that a lot of others did with the headline, right? So the Pope is trying to make gay okay, right? Somehow, the Pope is trying to make gay okay, and I'm thinking to myself, why is he bashing the Pope for this when in fact one of his like I guess Daily Wire is like 6 or 7 guys. I mean, I think I don't mean to be calling anybody out, but one of the guys in that group has a son who is I believe in a gay union, and like these guys don't care. These guys
Right.
Ben Shapiro doesn't really care. He cares about getting people to watch his show. He cares about like having cred with those people, and he knows that he doesn't share the same faith as a lot of his viewers. So he's got to occasionally make sure that people see that he's got some credibility with them. And look, the guy is right a lot, right? Ben Shapiro is right a lot,
Sure.
and I all that kind of stuff. So I'm not trying to say he's a terrible person, but he is in the business not of being right. He's in the business of getting people to click on his videos,
And he's
and
very good at it.
you just got to keep that in mind, right? You just got to
Yeah.
keep that in mind. He's in the business of getting people to click on his videos. And all of those headlines you're reading, they're not in the business of telling the truth. They're
Right.
all in the business of getting you to click on the news story and read a little bit deeper and all that kind of stuff. And that's the world we live in. And that is hard. That's a hard pill to swallow, that we live in that world, but that's the world we live in. The world is not, we're in the world, but we're not of the world. If you're all about truth, if you're all about love, if you're all about treating your neighbor the way you want to be treated, you know, this isn't our world. We're in exile somehow, you know?
Yeah. Now, I did see a little bit of something in the chat, so I want to try to like prime this a little bit. Now, anybody who's got two eyes to see and spends more than 5 minutes on the internet understands that there's a lot of division in the church right now, a lot of confusion, and you know, I do want to be fair in this and not just, you know, as much as I absolutely hate the term, like every time there's certain words that make me no longer take you seriously. If I hear you use a word unironically, you've like signaled to me that I don't have to take you seriously anymore. And one of those words is Pope splain. If I hear you use that word unironically, you've lost credibility with me, at least for the next few days. And you know, so whenever I hear that, I do that. But to not fall into that, I do want to say that, you know, I'm prior military. You're currently you know, the head of an educational you know, educational institution. And as sorry, I got distracted because somebody, he knows who he is like giving me technical advice while I'm live. If you see one individual, if you see one student or one airman doing wrong, you found somebody who's doing wrong. If you see a large group of someone doing wrong, you know, a large group of students or a large group of airmen doing something wrong, you go look for the leader who taught them wrong. And so like there is a certain level that like of responsibility that needs to be laid at the leadership, and that is, you know, that's priests, bishops, and you know, the Pope to a certain extent. So I'm gonna kind of like, now that I've like set that up, do you have any thoughts on that before we go on?
Yeah, I mean, the I guess the only problem with that is that he's the Pope of the whole world, right? So
Yeah.
it's not like, you know, if I see, you know, one of the teachers at the school that I'm at, you know, has lost control of his classroom, okay, I can say that guy, it's him versus 25 kids. I understand how this could happen, but he's really got to get better at this. I mean, the Pope is dealing with an entire planet of sinners, right? An entire planet of sinners. And so it's like, holy smokes. I feel like to me at least, that it kind of breaks down the analogy to like a kind of a military squadron commander or whatever. It kind of breaks down for me, where I'm like, I can't hold the Pope responsible for all of the ways in which people misquote him, misuse, you know, don't understand what he said, understand exactly what he said and go the opposite way, you know, all that kind of like, I have so much respect for that poor guy. I don't know if he might have the worst job in the world, because there's the expectations for no one else are as high, and the level of difficulty that he's got, nobody's got a level of there's just no way to compare it to anybody. I feel sorry for the man. I really do.
I like what he said immediately after his election, where I believe he was quoting John Paul I, which was immediately after his elections. He looked at the other cardinals and said, "My brothers, may God forgive you for what you've done to me." So, you know, and that is an important lesson to remember, because I mean, you know, you're the president of a high school. When was the last decision you made that made everybody happy?
I made my homily today super short. I think everybody liked that, you know?
Okay, everybody approved that. Well, you know what? Maybe somebody even criticized you as just like, I think he was just trying to speed up the mass. That he needs to show more
Who
reverence.
knows?
You
Who
know,
knows? No, no,
you
that's
know,
right. Listen, it's an incredible thing. And like I said, he's got the highest standard for himself. Everybody's looking at him under a microscope. I remember when
right.
one day there was this one poor woman who she reached out to grab his hand and she grabbed him and she pulled him in close. That poor lady was just so excited to meet the Pope. I mean, she needed to be close up to him. She needed to feel his proximity. She just needed it. Meanwhile, he's suffering from sciatica, and he gets kind of like he's leaning forward, which is like the worst feeling in the
I've
world.
got sciatica. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, so like he's in exactly the position you don't want to be in if you've got that kind of a pain. And so, man, he gets angry
Smacked
with
her.
her, and he
Yeah.
fusses at her. And I think he even kind of, but he's like,
Yeah,
"What's
he
wrong
smacks her
with you?"
hand.
And I thought, good Lord, he's human. He's human. He's going to he's got human emotions. He feels pain. He feels all those things. And the entire world saw this. The entire world saw this. And I thought, golly, that guy, he's just got a really, really, really tough job. And
Yeah.
everybody that he has is falling short of perfection, right? I mean, everybody that he's got to pastor and to care for is falling short. So not only is he human, but everybody he's dealing with is human as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah. That's
If that's
I
Pope
think
splaining, if that's Pope splaining, I'm sorry, but
well, and
you know,
yeah, and like one of the things that like I get frustrated whenever it's just like I'm being accused of Pope splaining when all I'm doing is just repeating his exact words, and the critics are the ones who are putting the spin on it. And it's
Yep.
just like, how is this Pope splaining when all I'm doing is providing clarity to what was actually said? Because, as somebody, we've been talking about, response to the second dubium, paragraph E and F, whatever. The somebody who's very keen in paying attention will notice that E is, in fact, not A, B, C, or D, So there were 4 other statements before that one was made. And all of those things, the church has a very clear understanding of marriage, an exclusive, stable, and indissoluble union between a man and a woman. Cool. Uh,
And we have
super
scripture,
orthodox.
and we
Yeah.
have scripture, and we have statements from the CDF, and we have the church fathers, and the saints, and like we have all these things for which this letter E has to be taken in the context of the whole.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be taken in the context of the whole. So the Pope is not going to be able to gather up all of those things and marshal them towards making
Yeah.
sure that you don't misunderstand what he means when he can't really answer your question in a black and white way. I mean, like, so people have asked me, they were like, is it okay to bless gay people? And I'm like, technically, yeah. Oh, yeah. And they freak out. Oh, are you telling me that it's okay for gay? You're in favor of gay marriages? Well, no, not at all, not at all. But I
Yeah.
bless crowds of people at the end of mass, some of whom would identify as homosexual. So I suppose I have blessed homosexuals in the past. I don't know. Like I blessed bicycles, I blessed people's homes and hunting camps, and I blessed all kinds of things.
What about bottles of
I'm
liquor?
sure. Yeah, well, one of the things that I think it's maybe like if there's an analogy that we ought to be thinking of is this is like, can a priest bless cancer? Like a cancer, a tumor. Can a priest bless a tumor? And part of you might say, well, it's made up of human cells. It's made up of human cells. Why can't you bless it? It's like,
Right.
look, I can bless a person with a tumor. I don't think you're probably not going to find me trying to bless a tumor, but I would bless a person with a tumor. And so that makes all these yes or no questions just a lot more complicated. It's just not as easy once you start dealing with that kind of dynamic there. It's easy enough, and I would appreciate I have appreciated the clarity that says there's there's a very clear definition of what marriage is that comes out in these answers, a very clear definition. I like that a lot. That disappointed a lot of people, but it is what it is, right? I like that definition a lot. It's very clear that we are subject to God's divine revelation, that we are subject to that, that also came out very clearly. I like that a lot. And I say I like it not just because it goes along with my own feelings, but because I know it's right. even in times when I might want to do things my own way, maybe not in this particular case, but there's some other cases I'd like to do things my way. But we have a church that is not just a governess, but is a mother. A
Yeah.
church that is our mother. And I think, yeah, there. I've said it
Yeah.
all.
I do see and I assume it's a typo because the I is right next to the U, but it's like you can't knowingly bless a person's mortal sin. And to which I say to that, like, amen. Like that is
Right.
that.
Right.
Yeah, that is
Right.
fantastic.
That's right.
Like that's put quite well. So thank you for adding that. And so I guess whenever it comes to reading these things, to you, just like when you read scripture, you have to keep in mind the target audience for it. And I think it is important to note that this responsa, one of the very first things that I looked up was the turnaround time. Like, how long did it take to write this response? In this case, it was the dubia was submitted on July 10th of this year. The response was the very next day. Anybody who's ever done anything with the Vatican understands that is not how fast the Vatican works. Like, I've got a friend of mine who is, and I'm not going to say who, but like, he's in a religious order that is canonically irregular. It's not the SSPX. Right now, and it's only because they're waiting on like a signature from the Vatican to like approve their specific house. And because like every other day in the Vatican's a holiday, like they've been waiting for years for this. So the fact that like the dubia was submitted on the 10th of July and the response was the 11th of July is almost a miracle in and of itself. But this response was given a very quick turnaround time, and it was addressed to 5 cardinals. People who, like, say it has to be read in all these contexts. The target audience for this letter understands all of that context.
Right.
So,
I think that's spot on. I think that's absolutely spot on. And this is like, if I had like the sort of like, the step back, overall bird's eye view take.
Yeah.
This kind of feels like the way that it's supposed to happen. That the Pope says something, and or not just the Pope, lots of people say things, and yet you see people not following along, or somehow misunderstanding it, in some cases willfully misunderstanding it, and all that sort of stuff. And so you get some people who say, and the church has been able to do this for a very long time, come up and say, look, we have these doubts, and here's the best way we can word them. And the Pope says, well, either the topic is too complicated to give you a yes or no answer the way that you're asking it, so maybe I can try to give you some guidance on this. Here it is. This feels like the way that the church is supposed to hash things out. It feels right in that sense. So for me, I go back to what I was talking about with the montage theory and the Russian filmmaker. If you take away all of the people who are absolutely freaking out, you're left with, I think, a healthy respect between the Pope and the cardinals. The Pope has even said before, I won't answer questions that people, don't ask in goodwill, and here he is answering these questions. So it makes me think he at least thinks those cardinals mean well, and their questions are legit and all that stuff. And so, okay, their questions are legit. His answers are good. Let's go. Here we go.
Yeah. It's, I guess one of my frustrations in this whole situation is the fact that, the Pope basically has a microphone that is like surgically attached to him right now. This has not been the case in most of church history. So even if the Pope says something that's maybe like off the cuff or whatever, it always gets blown out of proportion for the next couple weeks. And let's be real here. This whole situation, like with this letter, is going to be done in like 2 weeks, and we're going to quit.
I sure hope so. I hope it's not like, I hope, I sure hope you're right. I wonder though, only because, the Synod is expected to last a pretty long time. I was really hoping for that 1 month deal, but it looks like it's going to be extended. I say I was hoping for it. I mean, I just know that there's going to be a lot of confusion, and I know a whole lot of people who write me emails and send me texts, and what's going on here. But they do the same thing for, like, I don't know, when somebody says the Pope isn't the Pope, right? Which is like I
Mhm.
run out of steam when it comes to even trying to, to be patient with those kinds of questions, right? But there are let's not like let's not gaslight anybody and say that
Right.
this doesn't hurt to go through. It does
Right.
hurt to go through. It does feel painful. But this is also like the cross. This is being human. This is living out the faith the best way that we know how. And some things are going to always seem extremely clear to me. Other things are going to seem less so. And the church has been through, believe it or not, I think far worse times.
Yeah.
And here, some people will say this is the worst time ever. I don't believe that. I think that the
Yeah.
church has been through much worse, much harder times. And I believe that God loves his church, and I just want to be part of it. I want to always be part of it. I believe the Pope is an integral part of it. So here we are. Let's carry that cross and smile. Take a deep breath. Carry on.
Yeah. And as far as like, oh, this is the worst time we've ever been in, I can't remember. I want to say it was when one of the popes who we call, like, I think is like Pope Saint somebody the Great, not John Paul. This is like back medieval era. And upon being elected, some other like very saintly advisor said to him that the sodomy in the monasteries that is like completely rampant is now your responsibility.
Holy smokes.
And it's just like, I mean, how could imagine that? Like, how would you imagine like taking over a high school and like, hey, like 90% of the kids are drug addicts, and
Yeah.
if they don't get cleaned up, it's your fault.
Right.
Like, which
Okay. So
yeah,
all right. So this is going to seem off track, but I think it's apropos.
yeah, go
right?
ahead.
Jesuit high school's got a couple of safety deposit boxes, and we haven't been able to open them for a really long time. Finally opened them up, and we found one is a history of the school, and it includes. We just opened it up to kind of a random page and read it. But this is what the page said. Let's see if I can read this for you real quick. And it's in kind of an old fashioned language, and don't laugh at my eyesight. I have to put the phone real close to my eyes. Okay. At once, a hostility. This is talking about the beginnings of the school and the parish church that were built together
Mhm.
in downtown New Orleans back in late 1840s. At once, a hostility confronted him that had interesting features. The Masons and then rampant Know Nothings, combined with the Methodists, had a nearby college on their own to oust the Jesuits, and they had the city council run a road through the 4-acre plot right over the college foundation. When Father Cambiaso proceeded to build on the bisection and to clear the adjoining church premises for the new church, they sent him a message that they had a 5-barreled gun that would explode on him unless he quit forthwith. He replied that should they assail him, they would find good shooting from his own single-barreled more effective. Like literally, they're fighting with guns to get a church opened and a school opened in downtown New Orleans. Like, how about them days, huh? How
Yeah,
about them days, right?
yeah,
Here we are worried about whether or not, I don't know. It just seems to me like there's been some pretty wild times in the life of the church. And I'm here for it. I'm here
yeah,
for this one. We're here for this one. So let's be saints. Let's do what we can.
yeah, yeah. Just a quick side note to not to derail the conversation even further, but here we go anyway. Being the moderator for the Council of Trent, I see the comments are like, if you watch, like, Trent recently posted a meet the team kind of video, and like my video, I was sitting in this chair, and it was just like, like that was exactly how like I feel a lot of times after
Yeah.
reading some of those comments.
Oh,
But
that's a shame.
it's
I always try to leave him good comments.
oh, your comments are fantastic, and I always try to make sure that I leave a heart on those.
Oh, great.
Uh, but a lot of times you get like these conspiracy theories that show up, and especially when they start, like when Protestants start talking about the Jesuits, I've just started like, oh well, did you know the Jesuits did all this, and I'm like, and I've just started taking to like, I really wish that what you were saying was true, because if it was, the Jesuits would be so much cooler.
Yeah. That's right. there's some there's some crazy thoughts out there, and God bless the people who feel them and think them, because I like that most of the time I think, you know, if you sat down with me and we drank a cup of coffee, we'd probably be on the same page about a lot of stuff.
Oh yeah.
And then you'd be freaked out to know that you were talking with a Jesuit and I probably poisoned your coffee, you know? So
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Okay. So I've got a few questions in the chat here that I'm going to throw up.
sure.
So Veritas is asking, would anyone have a problem with the critique that the Pope could have been more clear, and his leaving room for all this discussion could do more harm than good? Now, you kind of addressed this earlier, but do you mind just rehashing that a little bit?
Yeah. So every time the Pope speaks, he's speaking in continuity with all of the sources and background that we're all used to, right? So Scripture and the early Church Fathers and these great theologians that we have, and all the doctrine and everything that you find in Denzinger and all that kind of stuff. Like when he speaks, he's not going to write a tome, you know, 3 feet thick, to make sure that there's no way to make a mistake with what he says, or misunderstand what he says. Now, I will say this: John Paul II and certainly Benedict XVI did a great job of always qualifying what they said, because they spoke like theologians. They spoke, you know, they qualified what they said left and right all the time, and it was just a lot harder to do that. We have a Pope who doesn't do that now. And so, you know, can you critique the Pope for that? Because he speaks a little bit more, you know, sort of freely on airplanes and whatnot. Yeah, you can critique him. But also just know where you need, just like meet him where he's at with what he's saying, right? If he's saying what he's saying in an ambiguous way, do you think he's like strategically ambiguous here? Or do you think he's just talking to some cardinals who already know what he means, you know? So
Right.
that's where I'm at with most of that stuff. Is that like, is the critique that you need more nuance, or is the critique that the Pope, that other people are going to run wild with what he said? Is that the critique? Or, you know, I mean, for me, I believe you're always going to find dissident priests are going to be dissident priests. And so it's going to be real hard to say things in such an airtight way that you could never get away with doing anything wrong and say, well, the Pope said I could do this, you know? So, yeah, I mean, Veritas, yes, the truth is you can critique the Pope for that. You certainly can. I think that there are worse things than not, you know, qualifying every single statement you ever make, though. Like, I don't think that makes him a bad Pope. I really don't.
Yeah. And I think it's really, you know, there's something to be said about the fact that, you know, JP2 took over in 1978. For most of the internet using population, 1978 was before most of us were born. So, like, you know, we've been very accustomed to, you know, Pope St. John Paul II and Pope Benedict XVI, who, you like you said, were like theologians, like by trade prior to their pontificate. That's not the case for Pope Francis.
Right.
So,
guy was a bouncer before he became a priest.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, and you know, somebody who I, you know, consider myself to be somewhat Orthodox, whatever. I promise you that, like, if I was elected to the papacy, I'd make a far bigger mess. Like, the most reasonable thing that I could do if I got a letter that says you've been elected to the papacy is to decline, quite frankly. So, but yeah.
Right. But Veritas is right. I mean, this is the, you know, and I'll tell you what else, like I'll say this for any kind of like change management, leadership questions, the longer you are at your job, the things that you do well get kind of like really settled in well. And like most people stop even appreciating the things that you do well because you do them well. So people don't sit around thinking about it very much. The things you don't do well tend to stack up. And so his list of competencies are, we probably don't think much about the kinds of things that he's doing that he does well. What we do is we focus on the things that for 10 years now we haven't had clarity on X, Y, or Z. Like, okay, let's just take a deep breath and not be too mad at him, you know?
Yeah, you know, there was I've got a friend of mine. He's well, I'm not even gonna tell you that much. I don't want to out him. But a friend of mine who's a priest, who I was talking to him a couple of years ago, and he, you know, super chatty, you know, celebrates Latin Mass whenever he can. And one of the compliments that he gave to Pope Francis was, he said, Pope Francis has made more progress with the Orthodox than like any other pope in history. And so, like, yeah, like you want to say like there's some certain things that Pope Francis does well, but like the big rumor that's going on is that Constantinople is going to come back into communion with Rome, like in 2025. Now whether that's true or not, time will
wouldn't that be
tell.
something? Right.
Yeah,
Wouldn't that
but
be
it's just like, if Pope Francis is canonized, he will be remembered as the Pope.
yeah.
If this happens and he's canonized, he will be remembered the Pope that like divide that like healed the Great Schism. And
I
so
wonder too. Like, I wonder also, and there's no way of really knowing, but like, how many people has the Pope driven out of the church? I don't know. I would
I don't
bet
know either.
that the number of people that he piqued their interest in the church might be higher, right? So like, we forget that there are a lot of people who, when they saw this German theologian kind of whispering his way through everything, and who was who was big into the sort of liturgical smells and bells, and they said, look, I'm just not ready for all that. This is just so foreign to me. And then you get a Pope Francis who's like talking about soccer, and he's making jokes on an airplane. There are a lot of people who I think softened up and paid a little bit more attention to what the church had to say in that regard. So I don't know in the end, like when you say, how are we going to judge this guy's papacy in the end? I think you've got bishops who were going to do whatever they were going to do, no matter who was the Pope. And I think no matter what the Pope said or who the Pope was or anything like that, these guys are just hell bent on seeing an agenda get pushed through. And in the end, they're going to be disappointed. Like the church, I still believe the church is not going to go down the wrong path in this regard. But they're going to be disappointed. I feel sorry for them. I feel sorry that they can't see the love of God in the doctrines as they are. I feel sorry for them that they can't see that God is there in the truth and in the doctrines and in the disciplines. But I don't know that the Pope has driven away a lot of people who really had the faith to begin with, right? Like people might have left who were itching to leave anyway, right?
Yeah.
they were itching to leave anyway. I think they've been some of these guys who've left, right? So I don't want to like call out anybody's name on purpose or anything like that, but there's a handful of media types who have been like, look, they're either out or they're on the edge of being out, or they say the kind of things that would make you think they were out, but they're saying they're not, or whatever. Like, I'm not so sure that those guys understand or wanted or had the faith in the way they should have had it to begin with. I'm not sure the Pope is the problem in that sense,
Yeah. There's a lot there. So, but I'll go ahead and move on to the next question. So, Drew the Catholic is asking, Father,
what a nice guy.
I freaking love Drew. He's okay. He definitely wasn't the guy that was harassing about my tech issues earlier. Father, what gives you hope in the church today in the midst of scandal and turmoil?
Okay, so this morning, Jesuit High School, where I work, had an all-school mass, and that meant we had all the young guys that go to Jesuit in our big chapel, and I've had this feeling the entire time that something's going right. Okay. So Jesuit is doing things a little bit differently than a lot of other kind of like youth ministry type stuff that goes on, right? So a lot of people are like big into praise and worship music, and their idea is like, let's not give the young people too much. Let's kind of like let's adapt it to their culture as much as we can, and then maybe they'll be able to swallow some of it, right? And that is an approach. That is an approach that has worked for a lot of people. A lot of people get into all that. But at Jesuit High School, we do things a little bit differently. We had probably about a dozen altar servers, all dressed in cassock and surplice with their white gloves on, and their the incense throughout Mass, and we're chanting things, and that's not something everybody everywhere is trying, but we're trying it, and it seems to be working. Like it seems like these young guys want to be called up to that deeper level of solemnity, which is that something they lack in every other part of their life. Like there's no other part of their life that has that knows what solemnity even is. So when they get exposed to something like solemnity, they know something special is going on here. And just watching their reactions today during Mass. Feast of St. Francis. I'm up there preaching about St. Francis of Assisi, which is not exactly my bag, but I did it anyway. That's why I made my homily really short. But just watching these young guys respond to what's happening, to say the responses at Mass, you can see them praying. Gosh, that gives me so much hope. That gives me so much hope, because I think that that Jesus is the key that unlocks the lock that is the human person. And all these kids are human, barely human, but they're human. And so God, Jesus works. Jesus is the answer. And there we are, with the Eucharist and with the hymns and with the everything that we're doing. That gives me hope that in the middle of all this, it was like, this is really the real stuff right here. The headlines and the rest of the stuff is less so,
Yeah. Awesome. Fantastic. So, got another one here. It's like, so what does Father John think about upending the LGBT class to the appropriate class, as the Pope put it? I have no idea what he's referring to. So if you have greater context, go for it. Otherwise, I got nothing.
I don't know what he means either.
Okay.
Bashar,
right.
Bashar, I would love to know what you mean. But I'm trying hard. Upending the LGBT class. Can I say this about this is going to make people mad? I'm sorry.
Let's go.
Why do we group all those letters together? I don't understand why we group them together. Like, they don't seem to always have things in common with one another. They're not all the same thing ontologically. They're not all the same things in essence. I don't understand why they all go together. Maybe somebody can shed some light on that for me, but to me, they seem distinct.
Yeah. That's a really good point. But yeah, so like as we're winding down here, I did want to add a couple of things, just things that I've kind of listened to. I already kind of mentioned Father Jason Sharon earlier. If y'all want to go check out the Pints with Aquinas interview that he did last, I actually earlier this week I told Thursday that he needs to make this a clip because it's very relevant right now. But it's the final chapter in that interview, so you can go in there, go down to the chapters, last chapter, listen to it, because it's talking about like how are we to deal with these things, and with Pope Francis, confusion coming out of Rome. And Father Jason pointed to the type of Noah, and whenever he was drunk and naked, what did his sons do? Well, Ham came in and, like he took advantage of the situation. What I can't remember the exact phrase that was used, but like he uncovered his father's nakedness, whatever. However, his other sons covered their father. And, I think that's really important for us to know too, that like, even if there is something like our Holy Father is, has made himself naked with his words, it's kind of up to us to not like flaunt that in the public square. And, and as much as at the risk of being called a Pope splainer, I do think that it's worth pushing back on a lot of this unfair criticism. And, at the very least, especially in this case with like the Responsa letter, just the thing that provides the most clarity is just read it. Like it's just like it kind of speaks for itself. So yeah, I want to get your take on that.
It's not long. Yeah, read it yourself. It's not long, and read it in the context of what the faith has taught for a long time. Right. I think that's the key. I think we should be able to charitably engage it in the context of the church, which has been around for a long time, and in the context of charity. Like, I don't think that any of this discussion is meant to somehow, just dump all over any conservative. I don't think it's there to I certainly don't think that the Dubia was there to dump all over anybody who's, who disagrees with the church's teaching, even, or anything like that. I think going back to that same letter that says that, that the truth is not the only way to love somebody. Right. And I don't take that as in like, it's either the truth or it's not quite the truth. And that's a different way to love somebody, but that it's like the truth plus charity, plus kindness, plus understanding, plus, all the good things ought to all be together inside of our hearts, together, so that we don't end up missing the fact that all these things that we're talking about boil down to people, and we need to love people. We need
Yeah.
to be understanding our connection to these people as brothers and sisters, and we're brothers and sisters because of Christ, not like in spite of Christ, but because of Christ. And so when we do that, we'll be in a much better place, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, that's and I think you do touch on like a very important aspect of all of this, and that's it. Jesus Christ, like my goodness, it's whenever Drew asks, he's like, "What gives you hope?" And it's just like my I guess my
Yeah.
cop out answer, but is really the ultimate answer. It's like Jesus Christ is the source of my hope right now. Like the man beat death, so
Yeah.
the victory is already won, and I will. There's a really fun story actually. This is kind of derailing a little bit, but I was talking to my daughter. So lately, I've been. Uh, I hate reading children's books. I think that they're just the worst things. I don't like reading them. So instead of reading children's books, I've just been telling the kids Bible stories that I'm familiar with. So naturally, we start with the easy ones, like the Babylonian exile and what led up to that. And so I was telling my 6-year-old daughter about Moloch and how he was worshipped and the sacrifice of children and whatnot. And my 6-year-old got very, I mean, this made her very angry to know like they were doing what to babies.
Right.
And she asked like, is Moloch still around today? And I was just like, well, after a successful rebrand, technically yes, but it's like, but you don't have to like.
I'm sorry to laugh about something so serious, but that's a funny way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's just like we still sacrifice our children. It's just a much less interesting gods. But it's yeah. But I was saying like, no, Moloch has been beaten. Don't worry, Jesus already beat him. And she goes, so he's dead. And I was like, well, he's a demon, so no, but he's in hell. And I went, yes. And she just crossed her arms and looked down and went, good. And I was just like, all right, that's my baby girl. All right, good job.
Yeah.
So
that's kind of what I was talking about a little bit. It's,
yeah.
it's, while there's a ton of nuance to what you just said that probably, there's all kind of things we can say about the truth of what you just said, but there's also like just a basic human truth that says, gosh, it just seems wrong that people would, shove their children into a burning fire pit or whatever, like
Yeah.
something just seems wrong about that. That still gives me hope that most of us at least have that that sense in our hearts. I was joking about the students being barely human, right? But like they're human enough to certainly catch on to these things, and that gives me so much hope, especially about these issues that are that have a way of I don't know. Like I said, they have a way of taking us out of the fact that we're talking about people, and if we know that we're talking about people, it can help us to love them better, and maybe even in some ways learn something from our interaction with all of this, right? That it might even make us just a little bit more like Christ when we interact with people who are on the margins like this, right? That's what I think. That's certainly the life that Christ lived, and I think we're called to do the same thing.
Yeah, and lately in my life, there's people that and every single one of them, every single one of you watching right now, whenever I say, that one person that you really cannot stand, the person you like the least, Jesus Christ died for that person. Jesus died for that person, loved him so much, loved her so much that he died for them. And I think that's something that like we need to remember, that we need to keep that at the forefront of our mind as we deal and interact with people, including the leaders of our church. And like because of the immense responsibility that they've been given, as the faithful, our job is to pray for them, pray, fast. I was listening to Catching Foxes while I was mowing yesterday, and he was talking about like how a lot of like these traditional practices, like having a picture of the Pope in your home as a reminder to pray for him, like I mean, well, you're a priest, so I assume that you've got a
I've
picture of the
got the
Pope hanging
Pope
up.
and the Pope and the Bishop and the Provincial.
Yeah, I was about to say. So, like, okay, you're probably fine on that, but like of the laity, like, I don't have a picture of the Pope in my house. I don't have a
Oh,
picture of
no,
my
you gotta put
bishop.
one up. Yeah.
Exactly, and it's just
And the
like
Sacred Heart too. Enshrine the Sacred Heart, please.
I've got the Sacred Heart, like, and the Immaculate Heart of Mary. But like it's these are the practices that like have kind of fallen out of vogue, and it's like I don't think that's a good thing. And it's like if you want to say that Pope Francis is a bad leader, I would point to Scripture and point out to the bad leaders in Scripture. It's like bad leaders are always indicative of a faithless generation. So it's just like and I'm qualifying this, if Pope Francis is a bad leader, that means that we are a faithless generation, and that's something that problem isn't just going to get magically fixed unless it's the divine intervention that the
Yeah.
people of God received in the Old Testament, which was Babylon and Egypt. Like
I would even add to that every time in
yeah,
the Old Testament, at least, every time they demanded that they get a king, they've always been a little regretful of that, right?
yeah,
So
exactly,
God gives them prophets, and they said, no, but we want a king like everybody else. And like
right,
there's something to be said about that, especially for those people who their accusation about Francis is that he's not doing enough. He's not doing enough. It's like, okay, um, I can see I can see why that's right. I have the same thoughts sometimes, but I also wonder, like, what would it be like if the Pope saw his job as coming down with the hammer on everything he didn't like, and it's like, I think I'm okay. I'm okay with the Pope who tries to lead without forcing us.
yeah, yeah, and that's true. Now, one of the reasons why I thought you were uniquely qualified on this is that as a Jesuit priest, you are no stranger to shenanigans.
Right.
Now,
I've
what
seen
is
I've seen some stuff.
so like okay, so like as I guess as a parting thought, what would be your advice to everybody whenever you see something done by some form of leadership, whether it's priest, bishop, pope, whoever, um whenever they do something scandalous, what's your like go-to advice for that?
Yeah, I remember somebody gave me this advice early on. I wondered if I was in the Jesuits, and I wondered if I was in the right place for similar reasons, but they were just very close, right? So people I lived with were saying things, thinking things, doing things in such a way that it made me wonder, am I in the right place? And this very wise Jesuit told me that your vocation and their shortfallings, their shortcomings, have nothing to do with each other. And it was true. Like they actually have zero to do with each other, right? Like your fidelity to the gospel, your fidelity to the church, in the most real sense of the word, has little to nothing to do with the failings that you're going to find anywhere else, any more than St. John's, the apostle, that his apostleship had anything to do with Judas or Peter's failings or whatever. Like we are called in the world we're in. God has put us in the world we're in because he loves us. He put us in this world because he loves us. That means our salvation's like right here somewhere, right? Our salvation is in this world right here, in this century, in this decade, in the
Mhm.
country that we live in the world that we live in. Our salvation's here. And so God has put us in this world to be faithful to that gospel, faithful to that church that he founded, that he made a bunch of promises about. And if we believe him, we're not going anywhere. We're going to be the best that we can be. And maybe he's calling us to be a saint in the middle of all this too. So
Yeah. Yeah, go find me the story of a saint where everything went right, everything was easy, and it was just wonderful wonderful story from, birth to death, and never had a single struggle. And you show me that and I'll show you a fabrication. So but
right.
so on that note, I think I'll just end with an encouragement to you all, like just there's lots of reasons to be hopeful. At times are confusing, but the one thing that has not changed, Christ is king. The Holy Spirit has not abandoned the church, nor will the Holy Spirit ever abandon the church. And you know, just because you don't see the end and see how it's going to work out, well, you know, like we've just been given a tiny little corner to see what's going on. We don't see the full machinations of what God has in store. So, you know, yeah, to borrow a military term, stay in your lane and remain
Mhm.
faithful. So that's
Yeah.
what I've got. So
Very
anyway,
good. Very good. Kyle, thank you for having me. I really appreciate
yeah,
it.
and Father John, thank you for being so gracious with your time. It's a pleasure having. I've been telling everybody that my first interview with you was by far it's a shame it didn't perform better because it was by far my favorite one that I've conducted.
Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you. I really enjoy it. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I just